The email arrived at 10:14 in the morning. "Can you step into my office for a minute?" Nothing unusual about that. My boss preferred quick conversations over long email chains. I saved my spreadsheet, straightened a few papers out of habit, and walked down the hallway. When I entered, he was sitting behind his desk, smiling in that managerial way that tries to look casual but is still a little rehearsed. Someone else was in the room. A young woman, probably mid-20s, sat in the chair near the window with a notepad on her lap. She looked the way people look on their first day in a new office alert, polite, slightly overwhelmed. My boss gestured toward her. "This is Claire, she just joined the team." I shook her hand. She had a careful grip, the kind people use when they're trying to appear confident. My boss leaned back in his chair. "I need you to train her," he said. "Give it about a month, walk her through everything, systems, processes, the usual." That part didn't surprise me. I had been there longer than most people in the department. When someone new arrived, they usually ended up shadowing me for a while. Before I could answer, the door opened quietly. The CEO stepped in. He didn't sit right away. He stood beside the desk, scanning something on his phone while my boss summarized the training plan. Then, almost as an afterthought, my boss turned slightly toward him and switched languages. French. Their voices lowered. "Une fois qu'elle est formée," my boss said lightly, "on pourra la licencier." "Once she's trained, we can fire her." The sentence was spoken the way people talk about moving furniture: practical, efficient, unemotional. For a moment, the room seemed to pause, but only for me. Neither of them looked at my face long enough to notice anything. Claire certainly didn't understand. I did. My mother had grown up in Lyon. French was the language we used when my parents didn't want strangers listening in. I stood there quietly. Then I nodded. "Okay," I said. "Training someone to replace you is a strange experience. The first few days are procedural. You explain the software, the shared drives, the reporting templates. You answer basic questions." Claire learned quickly. She asked thoughtful things. She took careful notes. Every now and then she apologized for asking too many questions. I told her not to worry about that. Questions meant she was paying attention. What I didn't tell her was that every document we opened together revealed something else. Our department's billing structure was messy. Not illegal exactly, but flexible, in ways that depended heavily on trust. Some projects had costs reassigned after completion. Some approvals appeared in email threads that had been forwarded selectively. Work completed by junior staff occasionally appeared under different names when reports went upward. None of this had seemed significant before. Offices develop strange ecosystems over time. But when you're suddenly temporary, you start noticing the shape of the system that surrounds you. So while Claire learned the daily work, I quietly reorganized things. Process guides became clearer. Folders became structured. Email chains were preserved. Nothing dramatic. Just clarity. Claire noticed eventually. "You're very organized," she said one afternoon while reviewing a project folder. "I've had time to practice," I told her. She smiled, unaware of the irony. Around the third week, I stopped being invited to certain meetings. Not openly. The calendar notifications simply stopped appearing. Claire began attending some of them instead. She didn't seem comfortable with that yet. "Are you sure it's okay if I go?" she asked one morning. "Of course," I said, and I meant it. None of this was her fault. She was simply someone who had accepted a job. The final week passed quickly. By then, Claire could run most of the reporting cycles without help. She still asked questions occasionally, but she no longer needed step-by-step guidance. On Thursday afternoon, the email came. "Can you come by my office?" The same wording as before. I walked down the hallway again. Inside the office, the arrangement looked familiar. My boss sat behind the desk. The CEO sat in the chair near the window. This time Claire wasn't there. My boss slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "Thank you for your work during the transition," he said in a tone that was carefully neutral. "As discussed, we're restructuring the team." I glanced down. Termination letter, printed, signed, ready. I read it once, then placed it back on the desk. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "I actually prepared something as well," I said. I placed it beside the letter. My boss frowned slightly. The CEO picked it up first. Inside were the documents I had organized over the month: process summaries, billing records, approval chains, not accusations, just timelines and comparisons, patterns. The CEO turned several pages slowly. The silence in the room felt different now. "What is this?" he asked. "Just observations," I said calmly. While documenting the training process, I noticed some inconsistencies in how certain project costs were recorded. My boss leaned forward. "This isn't relevant to the conversation," he said quickly. The CEO didn't look up. He kept reading. A minute passed, then another. Eventually, he placed the papers on the desk and looked at my boss. "Where did these approvals come from?" he asked. My boss opened his mouth, then closed it again. "They were internal adjustments," he said. The CEO tapped one page. "These appeared to bypass our reporting controls." The room was quiet again. My termination letter still lay between us, unsigned by me. Finally, the CEO looked at me. "Did you compile all of this yourself?" "Yes," I said. He nodded once. "Stay for a moment." My boss shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The conversation moved away from me after that. Questions, clarifications, more pages turning. I didn't interrupt. I simply sat there. Eventually, the CEO gathered the documents and stood. "We'll review this," he said. Then he looked at the desk again. The termination letter remained exactly where it had been placed, untouched. "We'll discuss the staffing decision later," he added. When I left the office, the hallway looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Desks, quiet keyboards, the low hum of office air conditioning. Claire glanced up when I walked past. "How did it go?" she asked. I considered the question. "I'm not sure yet," I said, and that was the truth. Behind me, somewhere in the office, the CEO was still reading. But one thing had already changed. A month earlier, my future had been decided in a language they assumed I didn't understand. Now the conversation was happening in plain view.